Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down with leaders of today to help inspire and create more leaders for tomorrow. Because I believe the world needs more leaders. I also believe everyone is a leader, and that was a conversation we had in this episode with our guest, Rana DeBoer. Rana is the Chief Culture Officer for the City of Sioux Falls. You heard that right. A municipality, a government entity has a Chief Culture Officer. So we talk about what does that mean? How did that role come to be? How does she do her work? And of course, in a government context, how do you measure it? How do you justify it? What's the ROI of that? I think we think of company culture really born typically out of Silicon Valley startups or new kind of tech companies, but it certainly is not that. And a city is a company in itself. And so we talk about that. Some really interesting challenges ahead for the city. When you talk about the great resignation that has come out of the pandemic, as well as a wave of pending retirements from the baby boomer generation. So some really fascinating conversations here with Rana DeBoer. She's got really good vibes. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. So let's take a listen. All right, welcome to another episode of the Leadmore podcast. I'm here with my friend Rana DeBoer from the City of Sioux Falls. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Official title, Chief Culture Officer. That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome.
Any idea of how many cities have a Chief Culture Officer?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly. We're certainly on the forefront of it.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do people in other local municipalities have a role of helping guide and shape culture? Yeah. You just might not have this title.
Yeah.
And certainly cannot say that there is a position like this held within a mayor's office in another municipality, but maybe this podcast will bring them forward and we'll learn more.
You can find them and create a little cohort.
Yeah, for sure.
So new role, new title, but you were not new to working with the city. You had been in HR for 12 years?
About 12 years,
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And so is this something that you ever saw yourself doing, or maybe you never even realized it could be a role?
Yeah. I would say could be a role. No, you didn't really see that coming or happening.
As far as a career trajectory?
No, not really. The work of culture, though, absolutely. Yeah. That work was something I always had a passion for and always tried to build, steer, influence.
And I'm guessing you were doing before we even called it company culture, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So is the credit good? Does it go to then Mayor Paul, who came from more of a startup world? Was this a big initiative of his, or was this something that you were saying, we should have this? Like, what was the origin of that role?
Certainly all Mayor Paul. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Him coming in, having that passion and that value, really understanding what culture means from a business standpoint, and stepping into the government space, especially at a local municipality. We're a business too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so he really wanted to bring that into the city and have that be a standing legacy, right? Like that's one of the things he wants to leave his mark on. Is that?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I remember having coffee with him when he shortly, maybe even right before he just announced he was going to run.
Yeah.
And he told me, or maybe after, but he said there's 1,800 employees in the city. Yeah. So I get to, when else would you have a chance to lead 1,800 people? Whereas our types of businesses are generally more in the dozens or potentially hundreds.
Yeah.
And that kind of clicked at realizing, it is just like a business, right?
Mm-hmm. It is.
And so were you involved? Because one of the first things that he did that I thought was pretty easy, like low-hanging fruit, was come out with core values for the city. Did you get to be a part of that process?
I did.
So talk about that.
I got to be a part of that. That was amazing. It was a really great experience for our whole organization, and especially so for our leadership team. We had come off of a 2-year run with some challenging times, challenging leadership. It was tough. We were really ready for the care and the direction of Mayor Paul to come in.
Sure.
So that was really exciting, and we did it in such a simple way that made it easy for as many people to get involved as possible. And it's just a simple survey to ask the employees, what do we value here?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a great public servant?
Yeah.
And he just given, like we had mentioned earlier, some of the work that I had been doing in HR and in the organization, asked if I could help him pull together a team of people to go through all that data.
Sure.
And then he put his marketing wizardry on, right? And then we magically
get a logo, get a tagline.
Yes, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then to be able to march that out and just really create this new identity of public service and build that pride and that passion back into it.
And so, we all can be kind of armchair experts and see, did this culture shift work or not? But you were inside before and after. What did you notice when we decided, hey, we're One Sioux Falls, we have these core values, we have a mission? Did you see a change?
I absolutely saw a change almost immediately. And I think what's interesting is if we can just talk a little bit about the psychology of culture, right?
Let's do it.
There's quite a bit about that. He first walks in, brings in Erica Beck, rock star Erica Beck, chief of staff, brings in this new energy of caring for people and this one team meeting. What's a one team?
Yeah.
And One Sioux Falls, what does that mean? So you start to put some definition around what those things mean. And you've got a group of people no different than any other organization who are a little skeptical.
Sure.
Like, is this for real?
A lot of fluff.
Are you sure? Are you sure? Is this going to stick? Is this really what he means? And then you just keep punching at it, right? You just keep going. You keep doing the definition. You pull your leaders. You create that psychological safety. You show these are our values and we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And before you know it, you get about a year in and everyone's like, holy crap, this is real.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah. And I've spoke to like the police officers and I've asked them if they know the core values, and not everybody in the room, but more than I expected.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that stuff starts to stick. Because I think that's a question of mine is, can this live beyond an administration? What happens when there's a new mayor? Do we get new core values, or does the city keep believing in these same things?
You keep talking about it and you keep demonstrating against what it means.
Sure.
So you just can't let the foot off the gas pedal. You just keep going and you find those opportunities, and communication is everything. And communication and action, those two together, and you just keep demonstrating and showing that this is real.
Yeah.
This is what we do. This is how we do it. And before you know it, we're all in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift to some of your work that you're focusing on in your role.
Yeah.
So we know that, one of the reasons why this role was necessary is workforce. Like that's a big issue we hear in our city all the time. And Amazon's coming and this company's coming and the hourly rate is now this. And so what keeps you up at night as the chief culture officer? Is it that, or is it something else?
I think a couple things. I would describe what you're talking about as a little bit of a war on talent, right? It's a war on talent.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that comes to mind is you've probably heard or read about the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
So what an awakening, if you will, that we've had as a nation, as a society, as humanity through COVID, through the societal.
Yeah. And it seemed like we were first talking about that in terms of age, like baby boomers.
Yeah.
And now we're just talking about anybody who maybe had a realignment of their values or their goals.
Yes. Yeah. And you're finding people who are like, what's my why? What's my why?
Yeah.
What's the legacy I want to leave? And life is short. Where am I going to spend my time? And for those people who work full time, you're spending more time at work than you are sometimes with your own family. So everyone's on a position of, I'm going to make that a great use of my space, my energy, my time. I'm in it to win it. So I want to be a part of an organization where I can live out my why, or where it's congruent with that organization. So I feel really lucky that the city has a calling. Public service is noble work.
Totally.
It is noble work, and the servant mindset is very real. So people can come to our organization fulfilled beyond. So it's not about the money, it's about the impact and the difference that you're making in this community. But we got to tell that story better.
Yeah.
So the war on talent is real, and we need to tell that story a little bit better. So if something keeps me up at night, it's how are we telling our story?
So that idea of servant leadership would maybe be your weapon in the war on talent.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And as a culture person and someone who helps, I know you do speaking or consulting, who helps people find their why, do you ultimately think that concept of the Great Resignation is a good thing, right?
It can be. Absolutely.
Not meaning that people should quit, but at least reevaluating.
Yes, reevaluate and find that way in life to really flourish and do something meaningful. And it doesn't matter where you're at, right?
Yeah.
You know this really well. I'll take that incredible employee for 3 years. I'll get the absolute best that I can. And I'm going to pour into that person and help them be even better. And if they walk away and they go, continue their bad self somewhere else, all the better for us and our organization.
And you can be a proud parent almost.
Yeah, proud parent.
Well, I think the idea of I think what's the line someone told me one time, what if I invest in my employees and then they leave?
Mm-hmm.
And the counter is, what if you don't invest in them and they stay?
Right. Right. Yeah. You can't do what you don't define. Mm-hmm. So you define this greatness and you build and you develop your people to that. You can't be afraid of them to leave.
Yeah.
What you should be doing instead of the Great Resignation is the Great Attrition. So how are you creating this greatness that they don't want to leave?
Yeah.
Right?
They
don't want to go. Or it's a really hard decision for them.
Yeah. And so how is the city thinking about that when, even your role, right? It's tax dollars. So we have to explain the why. We have to justify it. We have to probably show some sort of measurement or ROI. I suppose that in terms of that war on talent, money is probably not the first thing that the city can lead with. Mm-hmm. So how we talked about the servant part. What other aspects you try to we're thinking about flexibility, remote work. Yeah,
right. Yes. What are those other benefits? And I think too, it's often underestimated. This goes back to telling our story piece, John, is that we have so many different professions under one hood. People underestimate the opportunities that they could have in a local municipality. I mean, just think about it. You go from a librarian to a police officer, over into finance, step over into public works, and suddenly you're an environmental technician and you're basically a science geek.
Yeah.
You're doing some really scientific heavy stuff. So out at landfill, people always laugh, but I'm like, you don't understand all the science that goes on out there. It's a highly technical position. So we have to tell that story a little bit better too. So the variety piece is there. We need to work on the flexibility, and we are working on that. We actually just had a conversation 2 weeks ago to step into kind of like a work-life project. How do we do a work-life study? So what do our employees need in terms of flexibility, benefits, right? All of those things that make work doable and help people maintain that fulfilling personal life, which is all gray, right? There's you don't turn a switch from one to, it's all the same stuff.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
When you talk about all those different job titles, you forget the diversity within an organization like a municipality, right? I mean,
you do.
Obviously we have, racial diversity, age, gender, but just background, of degree, interest. Hadn't given enough thought of that.
Yeah, so. I always say to people, we're about 1,300 strong. And one of the most challenging parts about this role as Chief Culture Officer actually it's not necessarily the size, because we're really not that big. It is the diversity.
Sure.
So then when you think about the heart set, the passion set, the drivers, the skill set, all of that, compare and contrast what that temperament of a librarian is compared to a police officer.
Yep.
So we've got to have some glue that keeps all those people moving towards the same target of service. You do you, right? They just do it in a really different way.
Yeah. If you think about it as like a campaign to recruit or attract talent, we can do it to get a designer and then probably replicate that to get the next designer.
There you go.
But the way you're recruiting, somebody in landfill versus finance, probably pretty different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things when your role was announced in the city, and of course had to get approved by city council,
Yep.
was this concern about workforce and how they estimate almost 20% of the workforce in the city government will retire by 2024.
It's quite a wave.
Yeah. So how do you think about that? I mean, that's good that you guys are already thinking about that because you can't start too early, I suppose.
I don't think you ever can, right?
Yeah.
Technically, succession planning starts the day that you interview with somebody. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yes, for sure. So that has been a priority and will continue to be a priority. And I don't mean to keep saying this. I don't think it's just the city who's feeling that. I think
absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, lots of other organizations. So it's tough for any leader in any department within our organization because we are a growing community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There has been a lot of change that has occurred. Think about the change that's occurred just in the 2 years that I've got put into this role. So creating this space to be really deliberate about that entire employee life cycle and really putting deliberate and intentional energy to say, how are we looking at not only just the retirements, but also those critical roles?
Yeah.
Yep. Because you've got some people that aren't necessarily in that retirement space, but there's a whole world of opportunities out there.
Yeah.
What if
Talent
that linchpin role?
And,
What if they go? So really building new processes and systems in the way that we do work, that we think about. That's got to be a priority that gets built into the strategy of
that's
how
smart.
you do business.
Yeah, that's super smart.
Yep.
And part of that story as well, like you said. So
it is.
Along that lines, we talked about sort of the justification of the role, and that's just how politics and government is. We have we line item, everything's transparent, and so you don't have to convince me about the value of culture, but how do you convince a city council about the value of culture when it's still probably considered a fairly new idea to maybe some?
Yeah. Not only city council, but also, our residents who maybe don't understand what this work is. It doesn't make sense to them. And we even have, businesses who are just starting their journey of what is this culture thing and what does it mean? So I always like to come back to the performance side of things, right? When your culture, the environment, the air, the vibe, the feeling, the pulse that's around you, the trust and the ability to truly let an employee's full potential come to life, you create the conditions. I've always loved that term. Like a leader's job is to create the conditions. And technically everyone's a leader. So it's about, right? Oh man, we could do a whole podcast on that.
Yep.
We'll save that one for later. When we create the absolute great conditions, not perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect, but just really great conditions, our public servants can think, do, and deliver their best.
Yeah.
What more can we say? That's a beautiful commitment that our organization would make to invest in our people in that way so that they do the absolute best they can to keep the quality of life of this community at its best.
Yeah. So you focus on the conditions and then get out of the way and let them do their job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And you hardwire some expectations. You can't do what you don't define. So these are some defining elements of our culture, of who we are and how we need to think, be, and do. And then you do you. Yeah. You go do your magic at landfill. You do your magic at the library.
So you can't do what you don't define. That kind of reminds me of that marketing line. I'm sure Paul used this. So you measure you manage what's measured, or you measure what's managed. I can't remember the way that one goes, but he's a metrics person.
Yep.
Do you guys have metrics of culture, employee surveys? How do you think about that?
Yeah. We've got 3 kind of metrics that are observational a little bit in the works, and that has to do with performance review system
Sure.
type of things. And we also do pulse surveys, employee engagement surveys. Yeah. So we have a really robust platform that we use. We survey the group on a quarterly basis, gives us some great metrics and a whole bunch of input, ideas, suggestions. But what I love about the system is it gives us an overall aggregate number, gives you an aggregate number per team, but then also helps to identify what are those drivers of engagements that really make people tick and keep them passionate and moving. So we've got those driver scores too.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a great system.
Some dashboard, I'm sure people look at, and
Yep.
And it's so it's so individualized. So as a manager, that's what I think what makes it fun, but also difficult, right? It's like you sit down for a one-on-one meeting, and you almost got to put on a new hat, knowing what Rana or Nick or Maddie or whoever what makes them tick.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of wrap here thinking about leadership. I don't usually ask this question, but you kind of laid the seed there. So what is your definition of leadership? Because I agree that everybody is one, but what would be yours?
I've always loved that thought that leadership is influence. So to me, it's that you are a positive force of good. That's leadership to me.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
And if anybody's ever heard you or hasn't heard you speak, I like that you have a good, like, to me, you radiate like good vibes, and like you want to make sure that a team or a culture, an organization just is kind of like vibing and getting along. And I suppose that's that influence piece.
Yeah, for sure it is. It's not about avoiding conflict though.
Sure.
Because that's part of the good vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing better than a healthy dodging something back and forth a little bit until you get to a place where you're like crushing it. Like, boom, that's it right there. That's a great idea. That's the right approach. That's the right decision. And it's only through all of those, thoughts and ideas and vibes that get sat on the table. You need them all so that you can get to the right decision.
It's that radical candor.
There
right?
you go.
I'm sure you've read that one. That's a good one.
Yes.
So if someone's listening and is a leader, and like you said, it doesn't matter if it's government or private. 1,300 employees or 18, like Lemonly.
Yeah.
Where should a leader focus their investment in culture, whether it be an investment in time, an investment in financially, personal development, growth? Where should we start?
I would start. I like a multiple, kind of like this tiered approach. So you start with self, and then you look at others, then you look at the community, and then you look at the world, right? So you'd go self, and then your immediate team, which might then go to an organizational level that goes to the community and then out into the world. Yeah, call me kooky. I think you can influence the world from the little spot
This
where
is
you
like
sit.
the butterfly flapping their wings, right, on the other side of the world.
Yes, that's exactly right. So start with self, right?
Yeah.
Start with self. I would say that's the first place
And
to
is
do.
that looking in the mirror? Is that going on a personal retreat? Is that
it could be
someone asking you tough questions?
Yeah, it depends on what you need. But your own self-identity, right? Your initiatives, and then your inputs. To me, you are your own culture first.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So start there. And then I think for certain it is looking at your senior leadership team to say, how cohesive are we? Just as a team unit, and do we have a good culture level set? Have we as a leadership team made it clear what our strategy is? What is our business strategy? And then what is our desired culture? Because they aren't different things, right? Your people and your strategy come together, and when they intersect is where you get that great culture, right?
Yeah.
It's what you practice each day. So that, without a question, we can all say the senior leadership team in any organization puts out a vibe.
Yeah,
that vibe radiates throughout the whole organization.
Sets the tone. Yep.
Yeah, totally sets the tone. So those would be places to put that investment. But I think, what is your desired culture? What do you need to be great and define your business strategy and then the behaviors, actions that you need out of your people, and then figure out how you're going to create systems of inspiration and accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the city is an interesting case study, and I think there's always a lot of fear or maybe trepidation of like, well, changing culture is slow and it's going to take forever and it's going to be a huge time and commit. The best time to start was yesterday, and if not yesterday, today.
Yeah.
And there probably isn't a slower, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but slower organization than a city, municipality, right?
Yeah.
In terms of red tape and age and just the organization's been around a long time. But it seems like you're getting quick traction or results on this work.
For sure. I think there's a little misconception that things move slow in government. Are there parts and pieces that move slow because of red tape and rules? Yes. But when it comes to what do we believe in? What is our purpose and our why? What is the leadership that we want to see at each level of the organization? I'm sorry, that flies fast.
Cool.
Totally flies fast, because you're talking about human dynamics. You're talking about human chemistry. You can change that. You know this. You can change that in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and one person can change that for the better or the worse, right?
Yes,
like
that's true.
I think that's always the line. I think Reed Hastings from Netflix says that culture is always under construction.
Yes.
And you never, there's no finish line,
No.
right?
It's
not
an
like,
infinite
our
game.
work is done here and you walk away. No, you keep going.
Yep. Like Simon Sinek, it's an infinite game. If you
That's
just
good.
keep applying energy.
Well, let's finish a little bit about you. I don't know if I think you are, you just referenced a book. So if you're a reader, what's a book that you recommend to people often?
Well, I just said Infinite Game. It's a great book.
It is a good one.
I got to tell you, I am just finishing Think Again with Adam Grant. Holy mind blower.
Okay.
Like
is that his new one?
It is a new one.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That book is amazing. Really, really good book. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
And a question I've asked, the show's only existed during a global pandemic, but it
interesting.
the question is relevant prior to, but how as a leader do you de-stress? How do you unplug from your work? Because I think that's important to self-care as a leader.
It is. Yeah, you have to, your capacity is at the foundation of your human potential, right? Your capacity, that's your mind, body, spirit. I love fitness, hence the pipes, right?
If we had
a camera,
yeah,
right.
I'm not sure if your headshot fully explains the pipes.
I've always been a fitness junkie.
That's cool.
So I find great decompression, de-stress, and just a complete reset through a great run, a great spin class, hit the CrossFit gym.
Cool.
Whatever the venue is, I'll take that.
That's
I'll
great.
take that high intensity hit.
It's an easy way to recharge or the quickest way to maybe recharge the batteries.
Yeah, the physiological benefits, the psychological benefits. It's beautiful.
It's great. You'd like this. Maybe you even use this question, but an interview question we use at Lemonly is, what's your superpower? So it forces us Midwesterners to brag about ourselves a little bit.
Yeah,
what do
which
you do
we
best?
Stink at, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
We totally stink at that. My superpower, lots of folks will tell me they really appreciate the energy that I bring, which is uplifting and empowering, right? I would say, though, to me personally, my superpower would be reality testing, which sounds really boring and dry. But I think I've got the ability to be able to really facilitate and navigate at the table, to be able to say what's real,
Sure.
right? What's our purpose and where are we going and how are we going to close that gap? So sometimes we get a little crazy, or we get off on a different tangent, or we can't see the forest through the trees, right? So I think a superpower is just helping people see what's really in front of them and identifying the clarity of, well, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And that's empowering.
That's a little like, hey, time out.
Time
Step
out.
back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Clarity
good.
break.
Clarity break.
Yeah.
We say at Lemonly, our mission is we design clarity. So we're right with you on that word. We love that word. And so the last question we always ask on the show are the leaders who have shaped you as a person, whether you know them or you've studied them.
Yeah. My grandmother was a really good role model to me. She was your Northwest Iowa farm woman growing up through the Great Depression.
Wow.
And she's that woman who knew everybody on the block, which is the country block, right?
Yeah. Extended block.
Totally extended for miles. Very faith-based woman. So the values that she instilled upon me, she taught me a lot even about the importance of being active and physically fit. She did. I'll never forget her being, well into her 70s and plopping down on the floor and putting her legs out in a V and then just touching her nose to the ground. Like, you got to stay limber so that you can keep gardening and, all those good things. So
that's fantastic.
That spirit. And she took care of everybody in the country, So she taught me a lot, and it's through the years of life that you realize what she's given you. You don't realize it at that time, but yeah. And I had a really amazing supervisor at Avera who'd always left an impression on me. She could pull me into her office and just completely kick my butt and hold my hand at the same time, right? She'd just completely you're way off track, and then absolutely empower you. So you'd kind of get this butt chewing, and then you'd leave feeling like, I can conquer the world. She's amazing.
Yeah,
so
that's not easy.
No, it's not. So I thank her for a lot of that perspective and some of those great gifts, if you will.
Those are great.
Yeah, those are two people that really come to mind.
Yeah, and I love your point about how we take little fragments from people, and like you said, sometimes we don't even realize until later what we've learned or taken.
There it shows.
So
yeah.
Well, this was a great conversation. I'm proud that we have you in our city, and excited to watch your work continuing on.
It's an honor.
I know that a lot of this compounds upon itself, and so a lot of the work you're doing is probably just starting to reap some of the benefits.
We're just scratching the surface.
So, cool.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks for coming on. And that was our conversation with Rana DeBoer, the Chief Culture Officer for the City of Sioux Falls. Thank you, Rana, for coming on, and thank you for listening. Remember, we drop new episodes of the Leadmore podcast every Thursday. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts. You can subscribe on Apple. You can click follow on Spotify. And we always encourage you to leave a review if you like it. You can leave a review if you don't like it too, but definitely leave a review if you like it. And thanks again for listening. Take care and be well.